Good morning, everyone. If you're looking for a Foundation Magic book lunch event, you're in the right place. We'll be starting in just a few minutes when everyone has had a chance to connect. We'll be with you soon. I see a lot of people signing in. That's a good thing. We'll wait a few more minutes so everyone has a chance to join. We'll begin at 1 minute past the hour. See you soon. Hello, everyone. This special event is brought to you by Rug Hooking Magazine. I'm Deborah Smith, editor of Rug Hooking Magazine, working from my home office in South Central Pennsylvania. I've been editor since 2009, 11 years now, communicating with rug hookers around the country and indeed around the world. My goal is to bring you the best rug hooking stories out there, and there are lots and lots of good ones coming up. If you love rug hooking, you'll love what we have to offer. We've been published since 1989, bringing you all the best from the world of rug hooking. We have a free newsletter, our 5 times each year print magazine, and a book club. Be sure to check them out at the website on the screen. And here is the latest rug hooking book by artist and teacher Victoria Rudolph. We'll meet Vicki soon, but first let's talk about a few housekeeping issues. If you get disconnected, you can reconnect using the same link. You will not be interrupting the talk. We are recording today's webinar, so if you have technical difficulties, don't worry, we'll send you a link and you can watch it later. And it will be posted on the RHM website very soon. We have the Q&A feature enabled on this event, so if you have a question for Vicki, send it in, and if there's time, we'll answer a few of them at the end. Let me show you a few of the pages in this new book. Vicki talks about her favorite tools. She also shares some of her favorite tricks, one of which is she's going to demonstrate for us today. And she talks about some of her projects and tells you how to think outside the box and create your own hooked masterpieces. And so much fun, she shows us her fabulous hooked confectionaries project. She earned a Master of Fine Arts degree from the Academy of Art University in San Francisco, California, by making this series of hooked pieces. So clever and so enticing and so inspiring. This morning, we'll give you a taste of what you'll see in the book, and I hope it convinces you that it's an essential for your rug hooking bookshelf. So without further ado, let's talk to Vicki. Let's get started. Vicki, let me introduce you all to Victoria Rudolph, now from Austin, Texas. Good morning, Vicki.
Hey, good morning, Deb. Can you see me?
We can. Good to see you this morning.
I just want to thank you, Deb Smith from Rug Hooking Magazine and Caitlin Eatlin from Ampre Publishing for giving me this wonderful opportunity. It's been so much fun to publish a book with you guys and do this webinar.
Well, let's get to know you a little bit here. Here's the first question. Tell me what made you decide to write this book.
You know, I am so passionate about rug hooking from the time I started that every time I do a new project, I got so excited. And then I started to experiment with different things and realized that foundation cloth was so much fun and versatile to work with that I decided to share what I'd learned with other people so that they could be inspired to do their own projects.
Well, what got you started in rug hooking to begin with?
Well, in 2005, my family and I moved to Steamboat Springs, Colorado, and I had sold my full-time calligraphy custom stationery business. And I got there and I had nothing to do. And I found a local fiber shop and they let me pull a few loops in the shop on their frame. And then I liked it. So I bought a kit and then I kept going back and buying more kits. And they finally introduced me to this wonderful teacher and mentor, Dixie Coyle. And so I started rug hooking with her and a group of ladies in a group called 6 Times a Hooker. So each bi-monthly, we would do a different project. Sometimes we did the same project in different colors. Other times we brought our own projects. So I started in 2005 in June. I joined the group in October, and by December, I had my first cutter. And I'd already purchased a frame and a hook.
So you jumped right into it then.
I did, and it was so much fun. And I loved it because it was so versatile.
What's your favorite part about hooking?
You know, I love all different aspects of rug hooking. I love hooking other people's patterns. I like designing my own patterns. I like pulling the loops. I find pulling the loops through the foundation cloth so meditative because once you get the rhythm down, it's just on autopilot. And I love color planning too. I just like the whole process of rug hooking.
Do you teach a lot?
I do. I've been teaching rug hooking probably since 2009 to beginners. And then as I've moved to different places, I've taught in different locations. Like I've taught in the Denver Art Students League. When we moved to California, I taught at our local rec centers. I taught in needle workshops. And I've also taught children in after-school programs, which I also did in Denver. So I've taught a lot of people. I'm a McGowan certified teacher. And that's all I do a lot of teaching. I've done a lot of teaching during the pandemic on Zoom. And then also last summer during the pandemic, I taught children in the park. The rec center contacted me and said, we need an activity for all these kids. So we would meet in the park and I'd teach them rug hooking, and it was really rewarding.
Now, as to your art, you translate your paintings into rug hooking. Which came first, your love of painting? I guess so. And how did you decide to start to translate that into hooking? Does the painting inform the hooking? That is, help you work out some of the complications of color and value? How does that all work?
Well, kind of happens simultaneously. I've always loved to draw and paint. And so since I was a child, and then one thing led to another. And then I guess with now what I find is when I paint something, it gives me a full vision of what the project will look like when it's completed. So painting allows me to work out any problems or solve color problems or shading problems. And sometimes I'll just do a primitive rug. So I'll do a primitive color plan and I might not paint that. But other times, most times, I will paint something first. I love seeing it evolve in multiple mediums. Sometimes I'll do a charcoal. It just depends on what the project is.
And I'm glad that you end up making a hooked piece of your artwork, because that's just so much fun for us to see the translation from paint to fiber. I'm not a painter. I'll never be a painter. It's fascinating to me that you're able to do that in your head and then make it real in life. What's your favorite backing to work with?
You know, I think linen is my preferred backing, though I have worked a lot with monk's cloth. I'm starting to plan to experiment on other things. I've seen rug hookers work on boucle. I've seen rug hookers work on wool. I've seen them. Anything you can put a hook through, you can hook. So I think linen is my preferred, but I love also to work on other types.
Where does your inspiration for your pieces come from? Do rug designs just come to you all of a sudden in a dream? Do you have to work at it? I guess the real question is, what is your creative process when designing patterns? You must start with an idea, and then what?
Well, it depends on where I'm living and what I'm working on. So when I was in grad school, obviously we had to pick a theme, and I picked the baked goods. So that was pretty self-explanatory. You know, I found different things and did them. But when we moved to the coast, I was really inspired by all of the sea life and the natural environment around me. It was just so beautiful. So I started sketching in my sketchbook, which I do sketch frequently, mostly every day for like an hour. And I jot down ideas. And then I'll like get an idea in my head, like my whale. And I saw it completely done. And I thought, oh, I've got to do this whale. So then I sat down and I created the whale pattern. And then I decided I was going to do a mermaid. And I've done other people's patterns for mermaids, which I love. So I'm collecting a whole, I have a whole collection of mermaid patterns that I'm working on at the same time, and also whale patterns. And my goal is to decorate an entire house with that. But for the last thing I did that was really big was I was inspired by a embroidery book about gardening or outdoor gardens. And so I created a rug hooked garden. And I was inspired by a garden that I used to go to in California called Filoli. So it just depends. I'm always coming up with ideas. And so I often jot them down on my sketchbook. And then when I'm looking for something, sometimes I'll go really funky. I have a gallery that just loves my work when it's funky. So I create scenes and make things like that for them. It just depends.
Sounds like you're never at a shortage for inspiration. That's
No,
inspiring.
I think that gets me into trouble.
Why do you often use rug hooking as your final medium for a design? Well, which do you prefer, textile or fiber or paint? That may not be a fair question.
I really prefer rug hooking. And I think it's because when you're rug hooking, it is so meditative and you can just sink yourself into the creation. You're not so worried about, well, if you make a mistake, you pull the piece of wool out or sari silk or whatever, or yarn. It's just very forgiving. And also I like the texture of the fibers and how it can come to life in a softer way. Mm-hmm. So you can do realism, you can do primitive, you can do anything you want and still get a beautiful piece. That's why I love it.
Yeah, and you do that so well. What projects are you working on now?
Oh, well, right now I am working on a koi pond that I have worked on for a friend down the street. She has a little koi pond and she loves dragonflies. And she had a red dragonfly land on her koi pond. Actually, it lands every day. So I did, I took a picture, then I did a color plan, and then I pulled some wools together. And so I'm in the process, and it's in a very, very, very early stage. I haven't put any real details in it, but I'm working on that right now.
Mhm.
And it will be more whimsical, less realistic.
So what is your typical day like?
You know, my day varies. So I like to use the motto, my time is perfectly synchronized. It really depends on the projects I have lined up and what I'm working on. So one of my things is I usually try to get into the studio by 9 a.m. in the morning. And then if I have a lot of projects, I might organize my day. So I'll go and I'll work on color planning one project, or I might have to create kits for an order from my Etsy site, or I might have to order supplies, or I might just sit and rug hook for hours at a time, getting up and stretching in between. I always break for lunch. Some days I like to work with rug hook with other people, so I'll do that. But I try to spend most of my studio time working on creative process. So I may be sketching a new project, I may be color planning. It just really depends on what's on my schedule that week. I stopped keeping a big whiteboard calendar because it created too much stress. So I just work on projects as they come along.
So there's no typical day. There's no typical
Not
day,
really.
really.
I mean, I'm in my studio every day, most days, but then life happens. So, you know, there are a couple times I'd have to run out for errands. I try to organize my day around what needs to be done, most importantly. And then I try to keep my weekends open for my husband. And sometimes after dinner, I will come back to the studio, especially if he has to work. So he'll be in his office, I'll be in my office, and we'll be tidying up for the next day. And so
well, I see you're sitting in your lovely studio right now, and
Thank
you
you.
are going to show us around. Vicki prepared this short video for us so that we could see where and how she works. Here we go.
So it was about purging things I didn't need, keeping things I do need, and keeping my process flowing. So every 6 months I go through and I just purge, I give away a lot of stuff, and then I start all over again, which is what I enjoy doing. Welcome to my studio, and I want to thank Deb Smith and Ampri Publishing for giving me this opportunity to share my artwork and my studio with you today. I'm going to show you how I set up my studio so that it could perhaps inspire you to create a space of your own to help your creative workflow. So I've lived in many places for my husband's career in tech, and I've been able to set up many different rooms as a studio space. And that gives me a place to come in and focus solely on my creativity. And I don't have to worry about a mess anywhere else, and I can walk away at the end of the day and come back the next day and continue to work. I actually started out as a calligrapher, and I only had a drafting table and a chair, and that was basically it, and a little light box. So when my son was born, I would take my son in a laundry basket to our laundry room and where my drafting table sat, and I would do my calligraphy and run the laundry at the same time while he sat in his swing until it was the next feeding time. Eventually the business grew, and by the time my daughter was born, I was printing invitations and stationery, so I required a larger space where I could work uninterrupted. So this studio was set up with an actual large workspace, and I have, because I serge all my patterns myself, I have a serger here. Sometimes I need a sewing machine, so I have a sewing machine on the other side. I have my sheep collection because that keeps inspiring me because I love wool. And then I have some of my pieces that I've made. I have roll paper, so in case I'm drawing a pattern out, I can roll it out onto the workspace. Everything can be cleared away, and I can just have a plain workspace. I have tape in case I need it. My reference books are here, so when I'm being inspired for a design, I can pull out a reference book. I also have all my rug hooking books because I love to collect rug hooking books and read them from cover to cover. And then I also have on this workspace, I have my template area, which gives me a lot of different shapes. So when I'm designing patterns, I can use these shapes. I have circles, I have hearts, I have stars, I have mermaid scales, I have skulls, I have quilting templates, and I have hexagons, and whatever I need, I can create. I also have lettering. This just keeps me being able to work in a continuous fashion. And I have my rug hooking space, and my rug hooking space is cozy for me. It's got a lamp, my tools, my cutter, and it's got the frame, and I have multiple frames, but this one is the one that I work on the most. I also have a smaller frame for smaller projects. I also have my strip holder, so when I'm cutting up my wool, I can organize my strips in different colors. And then I have my painting area, which if you read my book, you'll learn that I did my art thesis with two mediums. I did the painting piece in oil, and then I went and rug hooked it. I like to paint my pieces first so I can get a three-dimensional idea on a two-dimensional space. And then when I go to hook my pieces, I can better color plan. And then I keep a color wheel up here, so I'm always constantly thinking about how I'm going to plan my pieces. When I plan my rugs, I will draw out on a sketchbook, and then I will take that sketchbook and I will have it blown up at a copy shop. So here's one of the potential sketches I'm working on, and I may do several, and I'll use my color pencils, which I love these color pencils. I will use these color pencils to plan the colors, and then I will go over to my bigger light box, if it's going to be a big piece, and I will lay it out here. Now this light box I made myself, but you don't need such a large light box. You can also use a window, and sometimes I've taken patterns and I've put them up to a window, taped them, and then I've drawn on my foundation cloth. What I like about this space for myself is that everything on my workspace it's easily accessible. So when I need my linens, my foundation cloth, I store it in my closet, but I can take it out and lay it out and roll it out. The other thing I like to do is I have a smaller light box set up. So if I'm making a smaller pattern and I don't need to use all that electricity, I can use these smaller boxes. And it doesn't matter, you can either use a light box, or you can use a window, or you can use a bigger light box. Okay, so one of the things I like to really focus on when I'm planning my patterns before I lay them on the foundation cloth is color. And most of the time, I will source my wool from other places. There are plenty of people in this country that sell wool. There are plenty of people that dye wool, and I will go to all those sources. But when I'm planning, sometimes I will go, if I'm going to dye my own wool, I'll go right to the dye swatches and pick the colors that I think, and I'll pull them out and I'll use them in my process. But I may paint with gouache, I may use color pencils, you can also use markers, but I would say because recently I have been super busy, I tend to purchase dyed wool from other sources. And I like it because they're experts at the dyeing of the wool, and I don't have to think about it. And then once I've completely decided on my color selection, I will go to my wool stash. This is just here so I can quickly grab some colors and play with them, but I also have in my closet bolts of wool that I can use that are in all different colors, and they are textured, and then I have the ability to dye wool, so I will take some out and dye that wool. And that's where I also keep my linens, my foundation cloth. And then what I'll do is I will cut my strips, I will put them on my strip holder, and I will sit down in my chair and I will begin to hook. And I can hook projects on multiple size frames. This is my largest frame, floor frame, but I can have a smaller frame, and then I also have a travel frame that I like to use when I'm working on my rugs when I travel. And what I like about this space is that this allows me to sit here and either listen to an audiobook, or I can watch TV, or I can even, if I'm concerned about how my image is coming out, I'll take a picture and upload it onto my television. And that way I can look at it from another perspective. Over the years, I've been inspired by many, many different things, depending on where I've lived. And most recently, I lived on the coast of California, which is where the whale and the mermaid and the big whale came from. And, you know, I'll start on a project, and if the series doesn't work out, I'll stop the series, but I'll keep one or two. And then eventually I'll find use for it. And I was gonna have several different whales and several different mermaids, which I'm in process of doing. I was invited by the Kansas City Biennial that was postponed to create this little mat that's gonna go on a snippet box. I don't know what a snippet box is, but so this is in their book. So I was really excited about that. So I'm enjoying all these creative outlets, and this came from, in San Francisco, I met these people at the San Francisco School of Needlework and Design, and they're an embroidery school from England. And so I started taking classes, and somebody from London in their program had created a 3D garden out of embroidery. And I was like, oh, I'm so doing that in rug hooking. So that's what I did. I went and created 3D designs and for rug hooking. And in San Francisco, I was really inspired by a place called Filoli, which was it's an open garden. And so I went in and I kind of recreated it. And I loved it because it was a challenge. And it's all foundation cloth. It's all made from foundation cloth, and well, there's wood under here. And wool, everything in here except for some beads, it's all stuff you would rug hook with or embroider with. That was really fun. Thank you so much. And if you want to check out my book, Foundation Magic, you can actually have a step-by-step process which shows you how to go about laying out your own patterns, transferring them to the foundation cloth, and learning that you can pretty much do anything with this foundation cloth. This garden, the whale, you can pretty much make anything you want, and that's why I wrote this book, and I hope you are inspired to create your own patterns.
Thanks, Vicki, so much for giving us a sneak peek into your creative space. It's always so interesting to see where the magic comes from with all of our rug hookers. To purchase this book at the best price, be sure to join the book club. To join online, go to the link on the screen. Remember to visit the RHM website to take advantage of all our special deals. We'd love to have you all in our family. And now for today's special deals. If you are currently a member of the book club, you can purchase extra copies of the book for $19.95. Use the promo code on the screen. If you're not in the book club, we have a special offer for you too. For anyone watching today, you can purchase Foundation Magic for $24.95. That's $3 less than the cover price. Use the promo code on the screen. And as a special thank you for joining us today, we'll be giving away a copy of Foundation Magic. Cross your fingers, maybe you'll be the lucky winner. And we have another special offer, an introductory offer for a subscription to Rug Hooking Magazine for new subscribers. $19.95 for 5 issues, available to those watching today. Use the code you see on the screen. Now, Vicki, you said that you would demonstrate for us how to connect 2 small pieces of linen into a larger unit, ready for making a larger rug. So are you ready to go?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
Can you see
go
my
for it.
hands? Let me just pull this down a little bit. Is that a good view? Can everyone see that?
Yes,
Deb?
put your hands where
Okay.
you're going to work. Yes, that'll be good.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to show you, I wrote about this in my book. You can get rug repair thread at a place called HM Nabian in New York City, but there's other sites that you can find this on. And they come in all different widths and textures. This one is a poly cotton, but they have 100% cotton. And also that's for linen. But when I'm working on monk's cloth, I use embroidery cloth in the full 6-ply and white only, so it doesn't bleed onto the fabric. But what I wanted to show you was what I do is I hate to waste linen, and linen is expensive. All foundation cloth is getting more and more expensive. So I hate to waste it. And sometimes I'll end up with larger pieces and I want to reuse them for another project. So I will take my pieces, put them together. I'll iron it out so that it's flat. I will draw a line on it, which is about 1 inch down from the seam. And I will take when I'm doing linen and using the poly cotton or the cotton thread, I will use a tapestry needle and I will just use a running stitch on this piece of cloth. And I'll just run it through. It's super simple. And then when I'm done, you're going to get, sometimes I'll go backwards over the same stitch so I can fill most of the holes. But what you'll get is on the front side, you'll see a seam. And on the back side, you will see your stitches. So it's connected it pretty strongly. Well, very strongly. You can either iron that seam or afterwards, I often put trade check in it to keep the seams from splitting. The other thing is, especially with monk's cloth, I will use this tapestry, the tapestry needle and a cotton embroidery floss. And I serge my fabric. You don't have to serge it. You can use a running stitch on the top or a blanket stitch, anything to keep the edges from fraying. I find that monk's cloth frays quite a bit, but I still like the versatility of it. So I will use it and I'll piece pieces together for it. And then when I'm hooking it, I just wanted to show you, when you're hooking the piece, your seam is going to end up like this. Almost if some of you quilt, you'll see that when you're quilting and you put two pieces together, you iron it down. I tend to do that. There is still a little fraying, but you don't have to worry about that because you're going to rug hook over that seam. So I'm going to show you how I rug hook that seam. And first, I'm going to take a red marker. Let's see if I can get this. I'm going to take a red marker and draw the seam. Now, don't do this at home because you're not supposed to use another color marker, but this is for demonstration purposes, just to show you where the seam is.
Vicki, we need it a little bit lower to see better. There, that's better. Good.
Okay. Okay. So let me just draw this a little bit better for you. A little wider. So the seam is here, and I'm putting a red mark here. So when I'm hooking it, I'm going to take my hook. Can you see this? Can you see this if I move it up? Okay, I'm going to take my hook and I'm going to pull my wool down across the seam. Now, I'm not really following the pattern right now, but it's just because I want to show you how simple it is. And you just hook it over the seam. And sometimes you get a little piece out here, but that's not really significant. And then when you finish hooking your seam, it makes the bond stronger. And then you can slice your piece, your wool strip, and then you go back on the other side. Now, I tend not to hook in the seam where I've connected it with the thread, but I will loop it if I have to. Sometimes I will hook it in the seam, but I will loop it. When the loops come up, it holds it together much better. Can you see that?
Yes.
Deb? Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then if you want to use other colors, what I like about it is it saves me from having to cut a big piece of linen or other foundation cloth for smaller projects. When I have these pieces I can hook together. And most of these pieces I would use as a wall hanging. I wouldn't necessarily throw these on the floor unless you need to do a bigger piece of wool, in which case, if you're doing a bigger piece of wool, I mean, a bigger rug, then you might not be able to get the linen in the full size that you want. And this you can do for a larger piece. It's just a little more challenging. Is that good, Deb? Or you guys, do you need
Yes,
more to demonstrate?
have you ever put more than two pieces together to make a larger
Oh,
piece
yeah,
of linen?
yeah. Sometimes you know, if I have a bunch of these smaller pieces like this, and I
Mhm.
want a panel, I will put 3 or 4 pieces together. It's not something I'm going to throw on the floor. It's something when I'm finished, I'm going to hang on the wall.
And why
But
would you
yes,
not
you
throw it
can
on the
put
floor?
them together.
Why would you not throw it on the floor? Because it would have
I just
a
don't think
ridge, or
I
it would
worry
not
that
be as,
I worry over time that if you're stepping on it all the
uh,
time, it might wear out quicker. It's pretty sturdy, and I know that people who repair rugs do use a similar method to fix edges or pieces
Mhm.
of rug. But if you're doing a whole seam, sometimes unless it's a large floor rug and you really have doubled up on your running stitch, I wouldn't recommend it.
Okay,
I would
here's
only
another.
use it for smaller wall pieces.
You have a seam going across the linen, joining two pieces. Have you ever done a seam across that seam, or is that a really bad idea?
You mean hooking?
Okay, for
A
instance, you have
hooking?
two pieces of linen and you've put them together to make a larger piece of linen. Say you need even a larger piece of linen that would not be like in the panel configuration, but you would want to make it wider. So that new seam would cross the first seam that you created. Is that a really bad idea, or have you done that?
You know what? I have to be honest with you. I've never done that.
Oh, okay.
I've only ever done smaller pieces, and I've thought about doing a larger, bigger rug, but I would only have done that one seam on that piece across
Okay.
where I needed to connect the piece.
Somebody's asking to see the back of the hooked piece again.
Oh,
where you
okay, hold on.
across the line.
Now I have my loops I have my yarn in the back only because I needed to be able to hook it through, but this is, here it is.
Okay, so we can see the
So
seam. And
you can
hook
see
right.
the seam, but I'll be hooking mostly, this pattern will have everything hooked over. So you'll see that as you hook it, you're covering up these little bits, and it's pretty
And
strong.
show us the front again. And just a reminder, you put that red line on just for demonstration purposes. You would
Yes,
not
only for demo. You never want to use colored ink on your rug patterns,
for fear of transferring the ink. So we did something today that we would not necessarily recommend you do, strictly for demonstration purposes.
Right. And I've done it. I did it on one project in my book because I was at a point where the pattern was very confusing and I needed to lay out different colors in a checkerboard fashion. But I don't always recommend that, because if it starts to bleed through, I had a darker color where I did that, but I don't recommend it, because if it starts to bleed through, you've ruined your rug. Does that answer the question? Okay.
I think it does.
Okay, good.
So now, can you tell us more about yourself? Do you have kids? Are they creative too? Do they hook? Do they paint?
Well, I taught my daughter rug hooking at the age of 12, and she picked it up very quickly, but it wasn't her thing. And so now my children are 25 and 27, and my son is in the film business in California, and my daughter is in tech like her father. She's very creative. Both of my kids are very creative. He tends to do more things creatively, building, designing. He just built out an entire van for himself to travel with. And my daughter's just getting back into creative outlets. And I keep reminding her about the rug hooking. I still have her very first pattern that she worked on. So I would love for her to pick it up again. I have visions of mother and daughter hooking time, but rug hooking time.
Do you make custom designs for people? Can I give you a picture?
I do a lot of custom designing. I'm sorry, what?
If I have an idea for a rug Can you design it for me?
Yes, in fact, somebody I know asked me to do their dog. So I took the picture of the dog and I'm transferring it onto the linen, and I'm going to hook that for her. Sometimes I've just painted the dog and that's all they wanted, but other times I've had people ask me to rug hook. I think I'm on my third dog for somebody, but I'll do wedding commissions. I've done a lot of those where someone will send me an image of a house. Can you redo this for me? Or I will do a custom piece where they wanted something contemporary. And so I'll come up with a concept and I'll show it to them. And if they like it, I make them sign off on it. And then we run together with the colors and I do the project. It just depends on what somebody's looking for.
So what's your best advice for a beginning rug hooker? It all looks intimidating if you don't know what you're doing. What do you tell students to help them relax?
First I tell my students to relax, because it is such a forgiving process when you're rug hooking. First of all, if you make a mistake, you can back hook, you pull that loop all the way out. Secondly, what I love about it is you don't have to count. So it's not like counted cross stitch or needlework. And I'm not putting those mediums down. I'm just saying this is one of the easiest things to learn. And once you pick up the rhythm, then you just keep going. And then you start learning other things. And I also think what I like about it is it's so meditative. And I've actually given full setups to people who've had traumatic accidents or events in their life. And they have told me that has given them such an outlet to overcome grief or some kind of issue that they needed some help with. So it gives them some art therapy.
That's great. That's a really nice gesture. Is rug hooking expensive? Do I need all the tools, or can I get by with just a bare minimum at first? How does that all work? How do you end up with a studio like yours?
Okay, so what I tell my students is when I sell a kit to a beginner or I'm teaching a class, I teach them with a hoop, like an embroidery hoop, and then I bring them the kit. When people like it, when they decide that they like it, then I encourage them to invest in frames. And I always bring my frame to class so that they can try different ways of hooking. I also bring different hooks to class so they can try different hooks. And then if they really show that they're interested and this is something they want to continue to do, I tell them to invest in a good frame and a good hook. And I tell them if they want to start really doing a lot of work, then they need to buy a cutter. And all these items are available through resources you can find in Rug Hooking Magazine. And when I started as a beginner, I think I spent an entire day and a lot of free time looking on the internet, reading. I'm just one of those people that has to read all rug hooking books and Rug Hooking Magazine. And what I liked about Rug Hooking Magazine is it came with free patterns. So if you wanted a little project and you had some leftover linen, you could draw one of those patterns out on your foundation cloth. I wouldn't say that rug hooking is any more expensive than any other fiber hobby. Needlework is expensive. Embroidery can be expensive. It all depends on what you determine expensive. If you're getting joy out of this work, isn't it worth the investment? And that's what I tell people.
With rug hooking, you can buy brand new, never touched before wool, or you can use recycled wool, and that is a huge cost differential there. So it's a whole wide range that should be able to suit any budget.
And every 6 months or so, I give away all my leftover wool strips. Like I'll take them to a local fiber store, or I'll fill bags with them and bring them to Rug Hook-ins and just give them away. Because I know wool can be expensive, but like I said, it's no more expensive than needlepoint or embroidery or cross stitch or knitting. Knitting can be very pricey. So I tend to share my leftover supplies to encourage people.
That's good. Yes. We do have some questions from the audience. So here's the first one. This question came in a few days ago. I know you can hook on burlap, linen, and monk's cloth. What other foundations can you hook on that might not be as well known? And how would you transfer your pattern to those foundations?
Okay, so you can hook on anything that you can put your hook through. So I noticed recently, and I can't remember where I read this. I think it was Rug Hooking Magazine, or maybe it was the other ATHA magazine. Somebody
ATHA,
was
mhm.
hooking on boucle cloth, which has a looser weave, and the pieces were just gorgeous. So I would say anything that you can put your hook through, you can rug hook with. And I encourage people to experiment and find other methods as well. I think it's nice to start out on the traditional linen and monk's cloth and maybe rug warp, but you can pretty much hook through anything that you can put your needle or your hook through. And the hooks come in many different sizes. So you can get a narrow hook, a fine hook, and that might be better for a tighter weave of fabric. Did that answer that question?
Yes. And here's another one. To create 3D projects such as your whale, do you have to make 2 identical pieces and then join them together?
Yeah, so what I did was I drew out my whale in a template, and then when I traced it onto my fabric, I also did an opposite one. So I turned my pattern over, but I actually connected them at the head so that I wouldn't have to sew all the way around my whale face. So I figured out where I needed to keep it connected, and then I left other pieces open that I would use that I would sew up later after I stuffed it with polyfill. Oh, and I forgot to respond to the other question. So if you wanted to transfer your patterns onto any fabric, there's a couple of methods. You can use red dot, which is commonly used in rug hooking, which is an interfacing fabric, which transfers really well. And also I've used something called drywall crack that I learned from my McGowan certification girls. And you buy it at Home Depot or Lowe's, and then you lay it out and you use your permanent marker and it transfers really well. So either one of those methods work. And if you have a light source, you can use that as well. But some foundation cloths, these newer experimental ones that people are using, are thicker, so I don't know how much light comes through them.
Right.
I'm going to do that at some point.
If you were going to hook into wool, probably the light source would not be the best.
No, right. So you'd
red
have
dot or
to use
crack stop. Yeah.
Yeah, and you might want to. You're going to have to find, like, if it's a darker wool, you're going to have to find another color to
Right.
draw that out. That could be more challenging.
Right. Do you have a favorite width of strips that you use?
You know, I started out with 8.5 as a primitive rug hooker,
Why?
but I actually like using, oops, I dropped my, I like using all widths depending on the project. If I want really fine detail, I'll use a 3 or a 4. That's the one benefit of becoming a certified teacher, is that you get to learn all these different methods and the benefits of all of them. So I would say sometimes I'll even use a 12 or an 11. It just depends.
Wow.
Sometimes I'll just use a 6 and a 7 or a 5. Sometimes I'll just use a piece of yarn. It just depends. I would say that 8 is probably my go-to though.
Uh-huh. So again, what's the name of the rug repair cord that you used on the linen?
Oh, it's called Poly Cotton Rug Repair Thread. You get it at a company called hnnabian.com in New York. But you can also, if you're going to do monk's cloth, I recommend using embroidery floss. It's really strong. And I would only use white. Yeah, but any rug repair thing that any kind of thread you would need for the rug hooking to connect the linen, you can buy on this hnnabian.com that I found.
Somebody's asking for the URL or shop name for your Etsy site.
Oh, it's Hooked by Victoria Louise.
Oh, okay. Hooked by Victoria Louise. And somebody else is wondering where you purchase your wool by the bolt. Do you have a favorite supplier?
Yeah, so well, first of all, I'm going to premise this by saying everything I found for rug hooking, I have found through Rug Hooking Magazine. So if you get the magazine, you can go through the back and there's plenty of sources. But I would say I buy most of my wool from Rebecca Herb, the wool studio, door mill store. I've bought a lot of I buy my foundation cloth and some of my wool bolts, but a lot of my wool comes from Rebecca Herb. I'll use Heavens to Betsy. I'll use Honey Beehive. I'll buy dyed wool from other sources like Cheryl Bolenbach, Melissa Eisenbach. There's several people, and they're all listed in the Rug Hooking Magazine.
Yeah, visit our ad index and you'll find a whole list of people who can help you supply your rug hooking needs, that's for sure. Right, one more question. This may be the last one. Teddy says, what a beautifully organized studio. Do you use your wool strip tree while you're hooking, or how do you organize your strips?
So if I'm hooking in my studio, I'm cutting up my wool. I use my wool strip tree that someone made for me to keep my colors organized. And sometimes when I'm doing kits, it's a hugely helpful tool, because if I'm doing multiple kits at once, if I'm making 8 of the same kit, I just cut up all the different colors, put them on that tree, and then I can pull from there as I'm pulling the kit together. But it does help keep me organized. And then sometimes things become chaotic, as we all know they do, and my pieces end up on the floor and I just have to pick them up and put them in a basket. But I use that tree a lot.
It looks like a really handy tool. Okay, we do have one more question here. I've wanted to try rug hooking for years, but never seemed to get around to it. Do you think it's too late?
It is never too late to learn rug hooking. I've taught children from the age of 7. I've taught adults in their 80s and 90s. It's never too late.
It's never too late.
Never
And
too
here's
late.
one more question that snuck in. I'm a new hooker. What type of hook do you use? What brand and style?
Well, there are a lot of different hooks available. I will say that my favorite hook is the Hartman hook, because they come in this one's a bent hook. They come in all different sizes, but I've used a Milner hook. I've used the door mill, I think it's the Joan Moshimer hook. I give my beginners the Joan Moshimer hooks because they're less expensive. Though I had one beginner break her hook and that was like tragic, but she was holding it too tight. But I think that there's so many sources available for hooks. I like the ergonomics of the Hartman hook. That's why I use this hook quite a bit.
And where did you get your wool strip tree?
Oh, actually, a friend who was a contractor made that for me. So it's super easy to make. You just need somebody with a drill and good tools. He cut a big fat dowel for me and he put it on a base and he screwed it together. And then he drilled holes in that dowel and put smaller dowels into it. And over the moves that we've had the past couple of years, a couple of those arms have broken, but it's still very useful. And you can also get a smaller version of this, I think at the Woolery. I think they make one too.
It does look like something you'd be able to make from home if you had a little bit of carpentry ability.
Super. Yes.
All right.
He made it in like 2 hours for me.
This will be the last. Nope, one more question. Could you comment on rug warp as a backing?
You know what? I've only used rug warp once and in a class, and I actually really liked it. It's just I have a preference for linen and for monk's cloth, but you can use, I think rug warp is a very nice piece to hook on. And it's a little bit stiffer, but I think for smaller pieces where you're using a finer cut of wool, a finer strip, I think it's a good way to go.
Here's one last question, Vicki. This will be the last one, and I'm not sure that you'll really be able to answer it, but we can talk about it a bit. Is there a book that shows what different tartans look like hooked? I don't know of any books. We've done a couple of articles in the magazine about what plaids look like hooked. And Rebecca Erb at the Wool Studio did a really nice sampler with pieces of plaids that she swatched and then hooked right beside it so that you could see what the plaid looked like and then what it looked like hooked. Have you ever done something like that? Is there
I've-
some advice you can give?
I know
to
at my
our
last
viewers?
McGowan certification, we did do a little pattern, but actually there's a woman named Ingrid Hieronymus in Canada,
Oh,
and she
Ingrid,
put a
mhm.
whole book together on different stitches. And that has been really hugely helpful.
And
And you
that's not
can
really
order that from her.
That's not really tartans, though. Tartans I think of as the plaid, the actual.
Well, she
woven
does
plaid.
do, yeah, she does do some plaids.
But
I
Ingrid's
know
book is
I've,
great. Absolutely great.
yeah, I've not really done a tartan myself. I think about it all the time, but it
Well, here you go.
requires cutting up strips of wool in a certain way and keeping them
Yes.
together. And that
Yes.
to me is a lot more work than I want to do.
Yeah.
But I will try it again.
All right. Well, thank you very much for taking these questions, Vicki, and for sharing your tips with us. We
Well,
have a
thank
few more
you.
notes before we end today. This is our 5th webinar. Thanks to the pandemic, we all learned new skills, and we at Rug Hooking Magazine started this webinar series so that we could still connect with you and send you wonderful rug hooking information. Finally, we are starting to get together again and see each other face to face. Hooray! But remember, you can always click into our webinars for some fun and interesting rug hooking personalities. Check out the webinars that started it all, the 2 Celebration 30 virtual parties we held in lieu of Solder Village Rug Hooking Week last year. The pandemic kept us all at home, so we created a virtual show so we could all gather and celebrate celebrations. Then last fall, we launched the new book, Tattered and Timeless, From the Old Tattered Flag. Be sure to check it out for some country charm from Julie and Carol. Earlier this year, we spoke with Simone Voivodin when her new book, Mastering the Art of Punch Needle Rug Hooking, was released. If you're a puncher, you should definitely check that one out. And of course, this book launched with Vicki. This won't be the last, so keep your eyes open for more to come. Thanks so much, Vicki, for taking time out of your busy, busy life to talk to us about your new book. I'm so glad you were able to join us and give us a sneak peek into your book and into your lovely studio. And finally, a great big thank you to everyone for coming to our online events. To everyone watching, I'm looking forward to seeing everyone again in person. In the meantime, stay safe and healthy, everyone, and keep on hooking. Goodbye, everyone. See you soon.
Bye-bye.